Greetings, exalted ones, welcome to the video. Here, my intention was to create a nostalgic and cozy video examining the Star Wars galaxy as portrayed in the Super Star Wars SNES trilogy of games, released between 1992 and 1994. Due to YouTube's copyright system flagging the opening theme as John Williams' track despite using the SNES rendition, the epicness of the opening crawl has been muted, literally. However, grand things await in this bumper-sized video, so grab a blue milk and a fried monkey lizard and let's explore together. Well, if there's a bright centre to the universe, you're on the planet that it's farthest from. Welcome to Tatooine, a sparsely inhabited desert planet located in the galaxy's outer rim territories. Orbited by two scorching suns, inhabitants are forced to draw moisture from the atmosphere. There is a little vegetation here, and the planet is the homeworld to the species Jawas and Tusken Raiders, also known as Sand People. As you see, Super Star Wars opens up with a cutscene of a battle between Tantive 4 and a Star Destroyer above Tatooine. In order to kick the game off in an action-packed way, the player is thrown straight into the role of Luke Skywalker. But wait! Before we rush ahead, I'd like to say how cool I think it would have been if we could have actually have played as a Rebel Fleet Trooper at the start of the game. One of the reasons why the original Star Wars movie captured my imagination is due to the fact that we begin inside a very sterile environment with its Zerist or retro-futuristic aesthetic, giving it a familiar, cozy vibe. From the close-quarter claustrophobic corridors of the Tantive 4, we are then thrust into the expansive alien world of Tatooine. I understand why LucasArts decided to cut to the chase, however, and launch us straight into the action down on Tatooine. Boasting 3 difficulty modes, Easy, Brave and Jedi, it is up to you to decide how much punishment you want in this galaxy. The game follows the movie's narrative quite faithfully, though it takes liberties with some of the talky parts of the movie and morphs them into actiony romps in familiar settings. We begin in the Dune Sea with Luke bushwhacking womp rats. Well, actually, we begin with Minox, the flying creatures from The Empire Strikes Back, a parasitic flying bat species that thrives in asteroids. Another danger faced is the sand scorpions of the Dune Sea. Coming in various sizes, a simple blast from Luke's blaster will take care of these. If you kill 10 of these at the very start of the stage, you will get a blaster upgrade. Of course, Luke's favourite target to practice on, womp rats, also appear. They spawn in droves and jump around a lot. Defeating 50 of them in the spot showed in the video rewards another blaster upgrade. Next up, we have the pink sandworm, rare creatures that travel very fast in their tunnels. One of the Crate Dragon's favourite snacks. The Dune Sea is a very straightforward stage. Simply keep pushing forward, enemies drop plenty of health drops. I always thought the artwork of the vast desert, along with the SNES's powerful music capabilities at the time, mimicking the trench run music from A New Hope, created a very immersive foundation level. It is simple, and it is just the beginning. A hero in the making. I also found it amazing how the movie did such a great job of making a real life desert on Earth feel so mysterious and alien. I think desert worlds make good starting locations in fantasy movies and stories because they offer the bare minimum and then allow the movie to open up to a colourful array of absurdity. That is why the cantina scene hits so hard when we first see it. We go from this desolate, barren alien world to a spaceport full of creatures, much more bizarre than any Jawa or Tusken Raider that we have seen up to that point. Despite the Sarlacc pit monster not appearing until Return of the Jedi, it is the first boss of the first stage of the first game. On Easy and Brave the fight isn't too tough. The Sarlacc telegraphs its position with its tentacles, so simply move away from it. Then begin blasting it. The rocks can also be shot and destroyed. Wait, I hear someone shouting for help. It's C-3PO, and he says that Jawas have kidnapped R2-D2. Well, we had better go and help him. Buckle up friends, buckle up 3PO, we have a sandcrawler to catch. For the second stage we go for a ride in Luke's Landspeeder in order to locate R2-D2. C-3PO has informed us that Jawas have captured him. I always appreciated the SNES's Mode 7 to emulate a big open desert world here. I found something really exciting about being able to see the sandcrawler in the distance as well. We need to defeat 12 Jawas to progress to the next level. My advice is to simply move left and right. There isn't much point speeding forward, it just makes it trickier. Simply move left and right and the enemies will spawn. Move forward a little bit if the enemies do stop spawning. Once 12 Jawas have been defeated, slam on the boosters and fly straight towards the sandcrawler. While en route, try not to collide with any Womp Rats. And also avoid moisture evaporators. Sandcrawlers are one of my favourite vehicles in Star Wars. Their rustic colours and sharp angular design as it cuts across the desert almost has a sense of majesty despite being repurposed mining equipment used by Jawas for travelling and trade meetups. Look at that sky colour palette, beautiful. Right, grab your blaster, time to disintegrate some Jawas. Next up, we have to take out some Jawas on foot. They use ion cannons and thermal detonators to inflict damage towards you. In order to complete this stage, we need to scale to the top of the sandcrawler. Ion cannons, flamethrowers and Jawas will all attempt to impede your progress. Careful placement of jumps will get you to the top. A portion of the stage can be skipped by jumping onto this platform here. Once reaching the top of the sandcrawler, either destroy or slide past the cannons. Head right towards the cockpit. I thought it was cool that we got to see inside the cockpit in The Mandalorian Season 1 Episode 2. Shooting into the air above the cockpit will uncover an extra life and a blaster upgrade. And there we have it, the end of the stage. The fourth stage of Super Star Wars sees us begin by plummeting into the bowels of the Sandcrawler. Here we have to take out the showers with our blaster. Not quite like the movie, but hey, I guess they had to give us some obstacles to progress through the Sandcrawler. Here we will also come across things such as flamethrowers that are embedded into the floor and the walls. While initially looking like a labyrinth, the innards of the Sandcrawler are actually linear. In the original movie, the inside of the Sandcrawler is actually one of my favourite parts of the movie. To me, as a kid, Star Wars wasn't necessarily about the lightsabers and the Force. It was about the aliens, the droids, the world. And oh boy did the Sandcrawler have droids. I can't tell you how much time I would spend pausing the movie, walking up to the TV, squatting down beside it and just squinting and trying to make sense of all the wreckage and the debris and the junk and the droids inside the Sandcrawler. One of the first things we see inside the Sandcrawler is the RA7 protocol droid with its insectoid-like head, also known as the Death Star droid, due to the fact that we do see one later in the movie, albeit in black rather than silver, trudging around on the Death Star. Of course, other droids that we see on board the Sandcrawler include R5-D4 and the Treadwell droid. But did you ever notice the 3PO unit on board with the entire back portion of its head missing? Or this yellow power droid dumped in the background? Back to the game. After traversing these drilling pits, we'll come across this jump here. If you push against the wall, you will go straight through it into a secret area. You can collect some health and some gun upgrades if necessary, and there's also an extra life in there too. This is where we will finally meet the power droids. You might have to attack them because it seems like they've malfunctioned and become evil. But yeah, we're going to have to destroy these power droids. Also, we have to slide between these force fields here. I don't know why they have these on the Sandcrawler. I guess it's to keep the droids in check. But yeah, you just simply slide through them and then you drop down this platform. And down here we're going to have to take on some big drone guns. Be careful sliding past these compactors, and then we have another gun to destroy. Dropping into this room below, we'll come across the Spitter Pillar, a unique enemy only seen in this particular room and game. He doesn't appear in any other Star Wars media, and strangely makes a sound like a monster from Metroid. After finally reaching the bottom floor of the Sandcrawler, we have to perform some jumps over this hot sand. Possibly one of the trickiest and most infuriating parts of the game. One simple mistake, touching the sand, can kill you instantly, setting you back at the previous checkpoint. At the end of the stage we'll come across the lava beast Choenko. Again, another strange monster that would be more a home in Super Metroid. After defeating it, we can continue by jumping across the platforms and meeting R2-D2. There is actually a way to avoid this entire encounter with the beast from Mustafar. From this point on, which you can see on the screen, hold the shoulder button on the Super Nintendo controller, which raises the camera angle. Continue to progress through the rest of the stage whilst holding the button down. You won't be able to see the lava, but you can still see the platforms on which to jump on. Continue to progress right to the very end of the stage where you would have come across the lava beast. You'll notice that it isn't there. Jump across to the platform, which will hold R2-D2, let go of the shoulder button, and the stage will automatically end. Choenko, you are fired! Welcome to the land of the Sand People. R2-D2 informs us that the princess is in danger, so we better go out there and find Obi-Wan Kenobi. Instantly, we are come face to face with warps. Defeating these hungry enemies will result in a puddle of sticky orange goo that prevents you from jumping and running, so do take care when encountering these things. Minox and Jawas also seem to have problems with trespassers in this area too. As 3PO noted, the canyon is not entirely stable. This stage has always been a highlight of the game for me. Remember, only 3 movies existed in the early 90s. Additionally, the amount of expanded universe media was still in its infancy. So as a child, to me, this was my chance to explore and immerse myself into the Dune Sea and the Jundland wastes of Tatooine. It was my way to peel back the layers of this mysterious desert planet and learn more about what was out there. The imagination allowed for great things, and honestly, it is a reason I feel we do not need backstories for everything. Things get perilous at the canyon's edge, as we need to navigate these crumbling, narrow, rocky platforms suspended high in the air. We encounter 2 sections like this before meeting Obi-Wan. On the second, throwing yourself off this cliff gives discovery to a room full of extra lives. Upon reaching the other side, we meet Ben Kenobi. Here, he informs us the way of learning the Force. In fact, he even entrusts us with the lightsaber, the weapon of the Jedi Knights. As a side note, my original copy of this game on the SNES had about an 80% chance of crashing at this point, so if the game loaded past this screen, I was playing the rest of the game without question. Anyway, with the lightsaber in hand, off Luke goes, into the land of the Sand People. And oh no, 2 Sand People are following us. Well, it is the land of the Sand People. We have another problem too, Banthas. There's a herd of them, but luckily we only have to fight one at a time because thankfully they ride in single file. Despite Ben's encouragement to use the Force, it is actually advisable to switch back to the blaster. The lightsaber doesn't work anywhere near as good as it does in the next 2 Star Wars games on the Super Nintendo. I guess you could put this down to Luke being a new user of the lightsaber, or is it just bad gaming mechanics? I'm not entirely certain. However, we're going to press forward and we're going to beat these Banthas that, as I mentioned before, attack in single file. For some reason, upon death, the Banthas actually explode. I'm not sure if they're packing explosives, maybe they have explosives on them, kind of like the one in The Mandalorian Season 2. I'm not certain, but yeah, the Banthas explode. After exploring the land of the Sand People enough, you'll come across the mutant Womp Rat hiding in a cave. Here, he will spawn little Womp Rats that will attack you as well. It's best to just use the blaster on him, even though it is an uncivilized weapon. You can also strike the mutant Womp Rat in the face with the lightsaber, and it does deal good damage, at the cost of being hurt by his stretching arms. Mos Eisley Spaceport. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious. I've always loved that scene. Ben and Luke on the cliff overlooking Mos Eisley in the distance. After the sterile white corridors of the Tantive 4 and the vast empty dune seas, we finally see a semblance of alien civilization tucked away in the desert. And the fact we get to see the ships taking off and landing in the spaceport in the distance really gives us the thought of what else is going off in this galaxy far, far away. Much like our approach to the Sandcrawler earlier in the game, we have to take out a set number of Jawas before we can finally put the foot down on the pedal and head towards Mos Eisley Spaceport. Now on the streets of the spaceport, we, as Luke, must navigate this wretched hive of scum and villainy. Mos Eisley is one of my favourite parts of the original movie. The diversity of aliens, droids and background characters, padding out the streets. Sadly, in Super Star Wars, despite the sunset lit backdrop of Mos Eisley being a beautiful sight, the diversity of the spaceport is non-existent. Despite the occasional Jawa, we mostly encounter constantly respawning stormtroopers. The streets are also covered with spikes, perhaps supposedly wreckage from crashed ships on the planet's surface. We also come across dewbacks which are rather inanimate, unlike the banthas. In some respects, this mirrors the original 1977 release when the dewbacks simply stood stationary like background props until the 1997 special editions. The stage feels as if it outstays its welcome somewhat, and it is quite a challenge. At the end, we finally meet Chewie. Now we can have a nice Jawa juice at the cantina. Welcome to Mos Eisley Cantina. But please leave those droids outside because they don't serve their kind here. As a kid, my mind was always captured by this particular frame from the movie. The beasts of burden tied up outside of the cantina, the retro-futuristic strange little spacecraft on the right, which I believe is now known as a speeder, and just all the wonder of what strange creatures existed within this cantina. Well, we're gonna find out what exactly is in there right now. This stage plays like a beat 'em up game, such as Streets of Rage. Once a set amount of baddies have been defeated, you're allowed to move on. The cantina is populated with aliens based upon those seen in the cantina in the movie. The Wolfman, Walrus Man, aka Ponda Baba, and some Duros. Hammerhead Man watches from an alcove in the background. Garinden and Libria also show up for a brawl. The Tonica sisters also show up in an alcove in the background, overwatching all of the action. As a kid obsessed with the cantina and all of the aliens in it, this was the closest that I could really get to experiencing that strange alien location. But even then, back as a kid, I could still tell it was a rather crude representation of it. There's actually a fun anthology book covering the lives of quite a few of the aliens and characters seen in the cantina scene. Of course, we also get to see Figurin Dan and the Modal Nodes performing the background music. Oh wow, I don't remember this guy being in the cantina. The Kalahar boss monster is actually really tough. Trying to beat this on Jedi without any blaster power-ups is seemingly impossible. Both his neck and arms are super stretchy. Once he is defeated, we can meet Han. Oh, and sorry about the mess. And no, I'm not referring to those broken pixelated images at the top right. Right, we've made a deal with Han Solo and the Imperials are on our tail, so let's get out of here. First of all, we have to play a stage where we sneak past these stormtroopers in the streets of Mos Eisley. Nah, I'm just kidding, forget that. While Luke's escape from Tatooine began quietly, here in the game, the escape begins with a barrage of stormtroopers and sandtroopers in hot pursuit. While starting much similar to the first Mos Eisley stage, this stage does eventually progress to add a little more variety. Bounty hunters will begin shooting at you from windows before approaching the docking bay entrance, which is protected by a rather mean maintenance droid. Once defeated, and for reasons unknown, the entire docking bay in Super Star Wars is a death trap which wants you dead. Robotic claws, factory droids, in particular, have an issue with you. Inside the docking bay, the stage is littered with small explosive mines, which can be tough to evade. Additionally, the claws and droids explode and toss out shrapnel which will damage you if it impacts with you. Honestly, quite another frustrating stage. Thanks Mos Eisley. At least this stage has a bit more variety compared to the first Mos Eisley stage. Now we all remember that deleted scene in Docking Bay 94 where Han Solo fought that gigantic Imperial hover combat carrier. What?
No, he spoke to Jabba the Hutt.
Oh yeah, he spoke to a really bad CGI looking Jabba. He didn't fight this hover vehicle, did he? Scratch that then. Well, the final test before we can flee on the Falcon takes form of the Hover Combat Carrier, a floating Imperial craft manned by troopers. They brought out the big guns for this task. This fight can also be quite tricky, but taking out the thrusters and the lower gun as fast as possible will serve you well. With the carrier destroyed, it's finally time to hop onto the Falcon and fly away from this rock, and apparently straight into the guts of the Death Star.
That's no moon. It's a space station.
Contrary to the movie, our heroes do not carefully make their way around the Death Star in disguise. Here, they run straight through the hangar, blasting mouse droids, T-0D interrogation droids and Spider-Tor droids. The stage is primarily completely flat, with the occasional death pit, some of which hide GLADS, an acronym for Ground Level Automated Defense Droid Systems. Apparently these are on board the original Death Star, but I may have blinked and missed them. Along the way, elevated platforms can be jumped on and can be valuable for performing high jumps to avoid the incoming TIE fighters launching from the hangar. The stage feels as if it goes on for a while, and for sure you're going to be causing the Empire a big bill after all the droids you've destroyed. Finally, we meet the Imperial Defense Droid, also known as the B1 series worker droid. As imposing as it looks, it is unable to simply turn around. Therefore, simply sliding or rolling under its feet as it jumps allows you to dispatch it quite easily. When it opens its armour to reveal its weak spot, just shoot it. Despite all the commotion caused in the hangar, it's time to sneak off to the cell block and find Princess Leia. If you're enjoying the video and you made it this far, why not subscribe? Boring conversation anyway. We're gonna have company. We've finally reached the detention centre. This stage takes a more vertical approach, meaning we need to ride up elevators to reach the cell block holding the princess. Along the way we'll encounter a couple new enemy droids, one being the saucer droids, clearly based on the LIN droids from the Sandcrawler scene at the Lars homestead. We also have the Truth Serum administering IT-0 interrogation droid. It's on our heroic quest to rescue the princess that we also come across these Imperial spider droids. Imperial spider droids were also sighted at the Battle of Hoth. Well, in the Super Star Wars follow-up game, The Empire Strikes Back. However, I guess in the movie they were just slightly off camera. The cell blocks are protected by giant mashing machines which will kill you in one hit. I do wonder if these were inspired by and were to make up for the fact that there was no garbage disposal stage in the final game. One was once planned, and only one screenshot remains of what could have been. And unfortunately this is one of the only pieces of scrapped ideas in regards to the Super Star Wars trilogy of games that we really have. On the detention block we also come across these grabby claw-like interrogation droids. They're not too hard to get rid of, however. The princess's cell is guarded by a detention guard craft. The bottom part of the craft will occasionally open up, exposing a weak point. Once damaged, and once enough damage has been accumulated, the craft will explode and we can save Princess Leia. Finally.
Short for stormtrooper.
Well, that was easy. The tractor beam is now turned off and now we can simply go and attack. Wait, what? We have to climb a huge vertical shaft as either Luke, Han or Chewie in order to reach the tractor beam. While jumping from elevator to elevator, stormtroopers perched on balconies will fire at you. It's a relatively straightforward stage, minus the vertical platforming. At the very top you will eventually reach the tractor beam core itself. Here you can simply stand in the corner and shoot away at it. You'll know you're hitting the right spot because the entire screen will flash red. After the destruction of the tractor beam, it's that sad part of the movie where Ben Kenobi sacrifices himself. Our heroes then fly away on board the Millennium Falcon and then land on Yavin. Well, Yavin 4. On this jungle covered moon, the rebellion would analyse the data provided by Princess Leia concerning the Death Star, and they would then decide on their plan of attack. A squadron of X-Wing fighters would be deployed to attack the Death Star with the goal of firing a proton torpedo into the Death Star's small exhaust port. Here we go everybody, may the Force be with you. Now for the final stage. As Luke in his X-Wing, we need to destroy 20 TIE fighters and 20 towers, both of which will be firing back at us in this Mode 7 aerial dogfight. And on Jedi difficulty in particular, this is no joke at all. Having said that, this is the only Super Star Wars game that I have actually completed on Jedi difficulty without any save states so far. Once all enemies are defeated, we participate in the famous Death Star trench run. Once we near the exhaust port, Vader will personally face us head on in his TIE Advanced. And with Vader gone, it's time for that famous part. It's time to bullseye that womp rat. Great shot, kid, that was 1 in a million. And with that said and done, and a million mouse droids shouting out in terror, we have completed Super Star Wars. True to the movie, Han and Luke go to the Yavin ceremony to get their medals. Sorry Chewie. Congratulations, you have destroyed the Death Star and won another victory against the evil Galactic Empire. The Imperial forces have retreated and you have brought freedom to the galaxy, but be careful for the Empire might strike back. And remember, the Force will be with you. However, our dive into the Super Star Wars trilogy is far from over. The second game in the Super Star Wars trilogy begins, such as the movie, with the Imperials dispatching probe droids across the galaxy, some landing upon Hoth. Following this beautiful pixel art rendition of Hoth, the game picks up in Stage 1 with Luke on patrol with his improved lightsaber in hand. The saber mechanics are much better in this game. Heading across the frozen wastes, we come across dangers such as Hoth hogs and snow minocs, which are totally a colour swapped version of the enemy from Super Star Wars. As well as having to deal with hostile creatures that live on planet Hoth, we've also got to contend with these gigantic snowballs that are being caused by an avalanche. After having faced these initial dangers, Luke finally arrives at the top of the mountain and jumps on board his Tauntaun. Echo 3 to Echo Base, come in. There's a meteorite that hit the ground near here. Again, a beautiful piece of pixel art from LucasArts there. Luke, now on Tauntaun back, also has to deal with ice cats as well as Hoth hogs. Icicles also attempt to cause harm. Hoth is certainly a lot more lively with Hoth jellyfish and collapsing floors. Entering a cave full of gushing ice-cold waterfalls, Luke now faces iron eels ice plants and also ice-breathing wampers. The Wampa Cave is clearly quite different from the movie, almost akin to a zoo. On the topic of the Wampa Cave, I struggle to decide which version of the Wampa scene I prefer. The original, where we only hear the horrifying screams of the Wampa and its victims in some nearby ice cave chamber, or the special edition where we actually get to see the Hoth Wampa chomping away at the remains of its victim. Either way, I am relieved that neither of the renditions of the scene had a giant Wampa resembling the Emperor Demon Gava from Contra. Unlike this game. This boss seems to be simply known as the Wampa Master. Talking of Wampas, there was actually a completely deleted segment from The Empire Strikes Back where Hoth Wampas would attack Echo Base. They had to cut it due to the effects looking pretty terrible, but it would have been good if in the special edition they could have recreated that and included it somehow. Ultimately it would have been pretty pointless, but I think it would have been cool to see some more of the troubles that Hoth Wampas could cause on Hoth and what the rebels had to put up with in the attempt to hide from the Imperials. After escaping the Master Wampa's lair, it's back to traversing the harsh wastelands of Hoth and into another cave hosted by a bunch of our favourite Hoth-based lifeforms. Interesting to note is that there are Hoth Oggs and Hoth Bears. I never realised in previous playthroughs that these were actually two separate enemies. I think that the game could have done without this additional Hoth Cave stage, as there is still plenty more to go before we leave the wastelands, including our first encounter with a probe droid acting as a boss battle. It is probably a safe bet that the Empire know we're here. Just like that classic moment from the movie, Luke races back to the Echo Base as quickly as he can on a literal chunk of ice. Anyway, oh no, Luke's landed in a freezing cold lake. The probe droid returns from its icy grave, and this time it's meaner than ever. Ice piranhas attempt to harm you too as you struggle to stay atop the floating icebergs. Try deflecting the probe droid's projectiles back at it with your lightsaber. That's a good trick. I guess Luke didn't need Han's help in the game, because here we continue the struggle for survival back at Echo Base. I don't know about you, but I actually found The Empire Strikes Back to be quite a cosy movie, what with the rebels all hiding out in the abandoned base from the Empire, and all of the rebels attempting to keep warm from the harsh elements of Hoth's weather. Then, later in the movie, we have all of the heroes in the Millennium Falcon hiding out in the asteroid field. Meanwhile, Luke sits inside Yoda's small hovel in the warmth, shielding from the rain in Dagobah. However, there is no such cosy feeling in Echo Base here. It's filled with Imperial units such as AC-1 droids and spider droids that I mentioned back in the first game. As Luke races through Echo Base, he also needs to watch out for falling debris. In an effort to speed up his journey to his snowspeeder, Luke hops on board a speeder bike and comes head on with a group of snowtroopers on bikes of their very own. After a brief bike battle, Luke reaches his speeder, and now it's time for the Battle of Hoth to heat up. In this Mode 7 aerial battle, which still looks pretty impressive to this day, Luke must take down varying numbers of enemies, including probe droids, bikers, AT-ST chicken walkers, and AT-ATs. Of course, we will be using the tow cables to take down the AT-ATs. With one walker left, Luke races towards it in his speeder. Upon approaching the AT-AT, the game transitions into a side-scrolling shooter, and this is the bit I never passed on Jedi difficulty. Bikers and jetpack troopers barrage you until you reach the legs of the AT-AT. AT-AT, or AT-AT, stands for All-Terrain Armoured Transport. Thankfully, this is not as frustrating as climbing up the sandcrawler in the original game. And just like that, we enter the belly of the Steel Beast. Inside, we navigate multiple floors facing snowtroopers, ion turrets, and orbit droids. Upon reaching the top floor, we transition back to the outside where the boss battle takes place. Using a thermal detonator dropped by a jetpack trooper does the job easy, otherwise simply deflect the AT-AT's gunpowder back at it by using the lightsaber. A very easy boss battle actually. The next two stages involve Han's escape from Echo Base. These two stages are so alike, I feel that one of them becomes redundant in the process. Both involve fighting off troopers and spider droids, and navigating the stages on elevators. In one of the stages, Han comes across the 0G Assault Stormtrooper. It's quite scary looking, and we will see more of these later. The only real difference comes in the form of the boss battles. In the first, Han comes face to face with a combat attack transport featuring 2 swirling barbed blades and 2 laser cannons. The second Hoth stage has an AT-ST for the boss battle, so you'd be fighting on foot against a chicken walker. After almost 30 minutes of game time, we finally leave off on board the Millennium Falcon. We're then thrust into an FPS perspective in the Falcon's cockpit as we navigate the asteroid field. After wiping out enough TIE fighters, we set off into hyperspace, and spoilers, I am sorry to reveal that there is no giant space slug boss in this game. Personally, I wish that LucasArts could have dropped one of the Han Hoth stages and replace it with a on-foot stage inside an asteroid with the space slug as a boss. Yeah, I know, technically the Falcon landed inside the slug, and so a battle with it makes no sense, but as you should have gathered by now, the Super Star Wars trilogy takes liberties anyway. It sure as heck would have been a lot more interesting than a duplicate Hoth stage. Finally, Luke reaches Dagobah, and we instantly lose R2-D2 in the process. We better locate him. R2? Where are you? Dagobah is comprised of 3 stages, with the first being the shortest. The time has come to finally learn to become a Jedi. We learn the Force powers by collecting them on the stages in the form of items. They are missable, but you get a second chance to find them on the next Dagobah stage too. Most of the Force powers are discovered via slashing your saber around in the air as you progress past certain parts of the stage. 4 power-ups can be located in the first Dagobah stage. These Force powers include Heal, which restores a portion of your health once used; Elevation, another useful power which allows you to float above the stage, bypassing any tricky areas; Mind Control confuses enemies, often by turning them around so that their attacks miss you; Deflect also allows Luke to deflect projectiles. Unlike the movie, where the wildlife of Dagobah is quite scarce, in the game we come across a barrage of volatile wildlife. Dangers include acid plants, they are self-explanatory; Dagbats, a dangerous winged creature only seen in the game and only appears on Dagobah; Daggerpillars, carnivorous big caterpillars which are also only native to Dagobah, and these exist alongside swamp gators. Helios, floating blue brain-like creatures; porcupines, piranhas and star gems also make up the backbone of enemies to take care of on this planet. And oh, we can't forget the Gundark. Reaching the end of the first stage of Dagobah, we finally meet back up with R2-D2. On the second stage in the swamps, it is possible to locate the next Jedi ability, Ant Motion, which is a force power that slows down enemies. We can also find the Invisible Force power, which makes you invincible and able to run through enemies with no damage. It will drain your force energy very quickly though. At the end of the second stage, we'll come across Yoda, who gives us a exposition dump of almost most of his quotes from The Empire Strikes Back. The final stage of Dagobah allows us to find the final two force abilities: Freeze, which will freeze a group of enemies and is quite useful, and the super lightsaber power, which allows Luke to throw and control the lightsaber. A good amount of time on this stage is spent navigating the undulating back of a big green swamp beast. This is one of the tougher bosses. Avoid its chomping mouth and try to damage and slice off its armor plating. Small Dagobian caterpillars will spew from its mouth too. Once the weak points are exposed, you can finally start inflicting damage. The heal force power is useful here. And that is the end of Luke's training on Dagobah. For now. That boy is our last hope. No, there is another. Meanwhile, in another part of the galaxy, our heroes, Han, Leia, Chewie and C-3PO rush towards Cloud City in Bespin to take refuge under the wing of Lando Calrissian. What could possibly go wrong here? Out of the dreary swamps, we now, as Han Solo, scout ahead of Cloud City to locate Lando, who, unlike the movie, isn't at the landing pad to greet us. This is easily one of the longest stages in the game, but luckily it has a beautiful colour palette and a great rendition of the Cloud City theme tune to keep us occupied. The welcome party appears to be turret guns, grenadier droids, and expect to be harassed by the twin pod cloud cars. As we progress through the halls of Cloud City, small floating blue droids, as well as a larger variety, will constantly respawn in various areas. They are highly annoying, but can be farmed for health. And it isn't long until we encounter the first of many bounty hunters that have apparently tracked down Han to Cloud City. Forlom is the first to show their face. He dies quickly, but don't fear, there must be a cloning facility, as there are many more Forloms that spawn too. We do actually come across some snowtroopers here, which should be a big indicator that Cloud City is now occupied by the Empire. But instead, Han and his friends continue to dig deeper into Cloud City. From this point on, we come across Bosk and his clones. Killing enough of these enemies actually results in a blaster upgrade drop. Zuckuss is a dangerous enemy that has an annoying spinning attack where it launches itself like a projectile around the room. We also encounter the droid bounty hunter IG-88. I think it was a good idea to add the bounty hunters to this stage, as it wouldn't really make sense if we were just blowing away all of Lando Calrissian's security guards. We also come across everybody's favourite bounty hunter, Dengar. Well, the gang is almost all here. Finally, at the end of this stage, we come face to face with the Tabana hover transport. I assume this was used to aid in the gas mining over Bespin. If you are lucky enough to grab a thermal detonator just as you enter the boss room, you can instantly defeat this transport. If no thermal detonator is available, you can always spam Han's bombs, which is a secondary attack new to The Empire Strikes Back. After the boss is defeated, we meet Lando, but there's a problem. C-3PO is missing. Chewie, you better go look for him. The next stage, LucasArts took some liberties by changing the small droid recycling station on Cloud City and turning it into a giant lava-filled smelting factory. We play as Chewie here on his quest to find C-3PO, and he has a new attack here too, the spin attack. Thankfully the lava isn't a one-hit kill like in the first game, however the stage is still quite lethal, with guns embedded into the ceiling and walls which attempt to blast at you whilst navigating across the lava pits. Also, we also have to get bullied and budged around by the levitating armoured droids, which are only vulnerable when they open up their weak spots. Ugnaughts, the little pig-like people that work in Bespin, also feature on this stage as an enemy. This stage requires you to jump across giant floating chunks of metal that slowly sink into the lava the longer that you stand on them. IG-88 and Dengar also return here to cause you some bother. The boss of the stage takes the form of an Ugnaught controlling an Ugharo mining crusher, a device that so far has never appeared in any other Star Wars media. The boss will not take damage unless you damage all 3 of its exhaust ports. Once defeated, we can finally find and save C-3PO. Oh, this oil bath's gonna feel so good. The third stage of Cloud City sees Han in the carbon freezing chamber. This is one of my favourite stages in terms of colour scheme, much like the movie with the deep blues and the orange lighting. The stage is covered with metal claw hands which attempt to snatch you up, and be careful of the flamethrowers too. Being a freezing chamber, there are also pipes which will inject freezing gases that will freeze you if you're not careful. The annoying armour droids also spawn at some point on this stage, in an attempt to push you into a bottomless pit. The boss of this stage takes the form of the carbon freezing generator, which is actually easily beaten by simply hiding in any of the corners and simply blasting away at it with your blaster. Unfortunately, defeating it does not prevent Han from being frozen in carbonite. Good try though, Han. In a desperate attempt to rescue Han, Chewie makes a race across Cloud City. Now at night, this stage plays very similar to the first Bespin stage. Thankfully, this stage is quite short, and we finally encounter Boba Fett. Once beaten, Fett will fly away, leaving you a row of big red love heart health. Aw, it's so sweet of him. But that's not all. Continuing on, we have a second boss fight. We have to fight Boba Fett whilst he pilots his Slave One ship. All you need to do is shoot out the 2 cannons, and then when Slave One reaches the ground level, perform a spin attack as Chewie. It will inflict major damage to the ship. That is one strong Wookiee. Clotheslining ships out of the air. Wookiees are known to do that. Sadly, we didn't get to play as Lobot. Why no Lobot? So here's an image of him, just so he can be a part of the video. Next up, we briefly return to the X-Wing for some aerial dogfighting action versus some cloud cars. I don't remember Luke killing Lando's security, but regardless, defeating a certain amount will allow us to land at Cloud City. A cool feature on this stage was that you could fly below the clouds. A fun fact is that we never actually saw a cloud car pilot in their full uniform in the movie, and the Kenner action figure created in the 1980s had to be completely imagined for the toy line. Another fact is that an alien security guard was intended to feature in Cloud City, except it never made it onto the movie. With Luke finally arriving on Cloud City, we reach the final stage of Super Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. The game seemingly had a stage cut where Luke was in the carbon freezing chamber versus bounty hunters. An image which is on the screen appeared in the game's manual, and that is about all there is in terms of cut content that we know about for this game. Taking place inside the inner workings of Cloud City, we will encounter Vader's security forces, elite troopers adorning all red armour. The troopers are not really any more powerful than the regular ones, however. After dealing with the troops, Luke will reach Vader and the first duel with him will commence. After clashing sabres long enough, Vader will use the Force to smash out the window, causing the air pressure to suck Luke out through it. The next portion of the stage sees Luke free-falling down a huge pit with nothing but Rebel insignias to collect on the way down. These Rebel coins are a new addition to the second game, only providing a score incentive. The next portion of the stage plays out much like the previous, with troopers trying to prevent your next duel with Vader. Eventually, the time arrives for Luke and Vader to duel it out one last time. The fight can be quite tricky, but use of the Force Heal is very useful here. Vader will meditate and cause debris to come flying towards Luke. Destroying this debris can drop Force replenishing items. After beating Vader, he flees, albeit a bit different to the movie. He doesn't even reveal that he is Luke's father. Oh well, it isn't that much of an important plot point, is it? Congratulations, young Jedi! You have beaten the evil Imperial Lord Darth Vader, Master of the Dark Side. You have escaped from the clutches of the Empire with your friends, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, Lando, 3PO and R2-D2. The game will inform you that your journey is not quite yet over, and that you will have to return in Return of the Jedi in order to finally take down Lord Vader and save your friend, Han Solo. Now grab your favourite lightsaber and your favourite snacks, because we're diving straight into Return of the Jedi. Right from the start, the title screen has a sense of foreboding with the much more intense and darker soundtrack, as opposed to the first game in the series, which sounds much more light-hearted and innocent. This is possibly my favourite game of the three, so let's dive in. The game begins with a cutscene emulating that of the movie, where Darth Vader arrives on board the second Death Star. Vader informs Moff Jared that the Emperor will be arriving soon, and so Moff Jared promises to double his efforts. Meanwhile on Tatooine, Luke, Leia and Chewie race in a land speeder towards Jabba the Hutt's palace to rescue Han Solo. Unlike the other games in the trilogy, this one begins with a Mode 7 vehicle section. Not only that, but this one is akin to a deleted scene, because it involves a completely created scenario of our heroes travelling via a land speeder towards Jabba's palace. It feels as if it could have been one of those fabled long lost scenes talked about in the early 90s Star Wars magazines, such as the deleted sandstorm or Luke's lightsaber construction scene. As a kid, this stage prevented me from getting any further, and it is quite tricky for an opening stage. Taking control of the speeder, you must jump over the bottomless pits and avoid bashing into the rock formations. No enemies need defeating, simply travel the distance at the top of the screen to end the stage. As dawn approaches, Luke, Leia and Chewie begin to climb the mountainside towards the palace of Jabba the Hutt. Returning to this game after not featuring in The Empire Strikes Back is the character select screen, and for the first time ever, Leia is a playable character. Leia in a Bausch bounty hunter disguise is easily one of the best characters for the first two stages. The first on-foot stage takes place on the rocky terrains of Tatooine. It's large in size, and the ultimate goal is to reach the upper right quadrant of the stage. The best way to do this is to stay on the top tier of platforms as much as possible. Thankfully, we get a useful temporary power-up on this stage, granting you super Jedi speed, allowing really high and far jumping skills. The rocky road to Jabba's palace is fraught with many hostile beasts, including needle rats and invisible lizard. There are actually a lot of unidentified and strange enemies in The Return of the Jedi. One being this droid. I believe this could be called an Imperial energy droid. However, there's absolutely no information regarding this droid, and obviously it only ever appeared in this game. On the subject of aerial phenomena, we also have the winged lizard. We also have these purple mantis creatures that were found on both Tatooine and Endor. These creatures had several small hearts and were extremely tough to beat, A single mantis can withstand dozens of lightsaber slashes and blaster shots before being killed. We now move on to some unidentified beasts lurking on Tatooine, such as this small green and blue unidentified bug. This unidentified Tatooine arthropod creature, which I believe hangs around in the lower regions of this Tatooine stage. To be honest, I can't really ever remember seeing it when I played through this game multiple times. We also have this unknown Tatooine dragon that simply pops out of a hiding hole and attempts to snap at you with its long jaws. And continuing on with the subject of beasts on Tatooine, we also have the Arions, which are blue and golden manta ray looking creatures that actually do not harm you. They provide you with platforms if you fall to the lower level. Again, none of these creatures feature in any other Star Wars media, and so little information exists about them. Upon reaching Jabba's palace door, we are greeted by the door security droid, which you might notice has grown about 100 times the size it is in the movie, and instead of questioning you, it attempts to squash you and electrocute you. Now, as for Leia and why she's one of the better characters to use in the first couple of stages, she actually has a secret charge attack, where if the player holds the attack button down and then lets go, a huge shockwave of energy emits from her staff. I've watched playthroughs where people play through the game with Leia and they never use the shockwave ability because they didn't realise that it existed. And now it's time to meet, and I quote the security droid, "The mighty Jabba." Next up, we grace the dank audience chamber and throne room of Jabba the Hutt. It is packed with life forms of all types here, and it is not just the life forms that are out to get you. Even the big heavy light fittings take their chances to slam onto your cranium to attempt to kill you. The Max Rebo band featuring Droopy McCall and Slice Noodles nestles in the background. Sadly, we are unable to hear the audacious musical numbers. Upon starting the stage, frog dogs are quick to attack, and of course, Gamorrean guards are quick to protect Jabba. Miniature rancors pounce out from grills on the floor, eager for a snack. The Jabba's palace and sail barge sections of the movie, much like the cantina in the original movie, due to the amount of aliens, which always fascinated me as a kid, to the point that I would pause the VHS tape, get close to the TV and squint and try and work out every alien hiding in the alcoves. Unfortunately for me, I didn't have quite as much fun alien spotting with this stage, as the background and foreground repeats so often it is obvious there isn't much variation. Still, we do get to fight a violent bunch of grands. Not grandmothers, grands. G-R-A-N-S. The species of alien that re-uses the three-eyed alien. There are no sign of any yak face, a man or infant mom here. The stage plays much like the cantina in the original game. Once a bunch of denizens are defeated, you are allowed to move forward. Dancers taking the form of Ola spawn in numbers as great as sand people. Talking of desert dwellers, Jawa's also getting on the action too. A furry enemy based loosely off of an Elam creature sighted in Jabba's palace in the movie appears in this game, although packing a flamethrower and clothing. Salacious Crumb shows up at multiple points in the stage to taunt you. He also hangs from the ceiling and throws spikes at you. Harming Salacious causes him to scurry away. Upon reaching Jabba's throne room, Bib Fortuna takes the stage and engages in combat. Unlike the movie, Bib shoots projectiles from his tendrils and he can teleport? They wanna wanga? Say what? Anyway, Leia releases hand from carbonite. The next stage sees us as either Luke or Chewie as we navigate and infiltrate the palace through the dungeons. dimly lit with the spotlight illuminating the player as they make their way through this grim location. It appears maze-like in certain areas, with odd angular platforming sections. There are Gamorrean guards down here too, as well as squid heads, or enemies replicating Tessic, as he is now known. Quite a cool looking sprite, honestly. There are other enemies down here too, such as Chowers and the energy droids. It's also probably time to mention that R2-D2 actually acts as a checkpoint system in this game. As well as some automated turret guns down here, there are also these yellow slugs. They are unidentified and there's not much information about them. Imprisoned creatures attempt to swipe at you, just like they did to C-3PO in Return of the Jedi when he was escorted in the dungeon. How horrid! This is also the location where we witness 8D8 torturing a power droid, so I am surprised we didn't get any 8D8 enemies here. Now, you would have thought that EV9D9 may have been the boss of this dungeon. After all, EV9D9 was originally a peaceful, hard-working moisture evaporator mechanic, but had a programming defect that made her enjoy tormenting and dismembering other droids. However, what we do get is a giant frog dog as your challenge, and to be honest, there isn't much of a challenge at all. The giant dog frog spawns lots of small versions which drop hearts upon defeat. Out of the dungeon and into the Rancor pit. This is easily one of the most frustrating stages upon my replay of this game to capture the footage. Again, another dimly lit stage with a small spotlight focusing on you. It also provides some ambience of being in a really dark location. This stage has a lot of things that wish to cause you harm. Rock geysers spew out small rocks which block your progress and inflict damage. Green, blob-like enemies which upon defeat break apart, ejecting 3 red blobs which then also attempt to harm you. There's even large upside down snapping skulls with sharp teeth that will attempt to snap at you occasionally. This stage is also very maze-like, and it's easy to think that you're going back the way that you actually came from. There are small bridges made of bone which can be shot apart, which will allow you to proceed, and overall the terrain of this stage is so angular, and some of the jumps you are expected to do to navigate upwards to the next floor can be quite frustrating. Green flying bats, which have no additional information concerning them, fly around and spawn constantly, adding to the general annoyance of the stage. Though Luke makes navigating this stage so much easier than Han or Chewie, the problem is that he isn't good at fighting the boss. And do you know who the boss of this stage is? Well, it isn't going to be bloody Salacious Crumb, is it? It's the Rancor pit monster, of course! The pixel art on this boss is pretty amazing, and it looks very intimidating. You thought the Cantina boss was big back in the original game. The Rancor will stomp his fists and make rocks rain from the roof. Additionally, he will spew a stream of fire from his big saliva-filled maw. Han's grenades or Chewie's spin attack can deal a great amount of damage against the Rancor, and with the Rancor defeated, off we are sent to the Sarlacc pit for our execution. With the option of Han, Chewie and Luke preferred here, we must navigate the skiffs and fight our way onto the sail barge. The following 2 stages are a couple of my favourites. The platforming here is quite tricky as we need to navigate moving platforms as well as jumping on small spike trapped platforms. Also, there are wall-mounted turret guns. Luke's freeze ability comes in great use here. I think it is amazing how they built up a huge sail barge in the desert to film this scene in the movie. Nowadays this would absolutely just be CGI. Besides Gamorrean gods, enemies of the weak-wave species, albeit green-skinned as opposed to brown like the movie, will attempt to block your way, and some enemies will attempt to snipe you from the barge windows too. I'm not certain exactly what these enemies are based on, but I think they are supposed to resemble Klaatu, of which there are 2 of them on Jabba's barge. We are introduced to a yellow-clad enemy as well. It has green skin, and it's wielding a minigun. I assume it is loosely based off of Barada, based off of the bandana that it's wearing. We also have this Nikto enemy based on Vizan, which is a gunner on the sail barge, and this sprite actually looks pretty accurate compared to the character in the movie. On the top floor of the barge we encounter the boss of the stage, the mace-swinging Asumian. A hulking species which I guess was slightly just off of camera, wink wink, since we never actually spotted him on the sail barge in the movie. The Asumian has a straightforward pattern of attack. He jumps at you and swings his mace at you. The swing is telegraphed, so it's easy to avoid. It appears that this species was introduced into the Star Wars canon after its first appearance in this game. Meanwhile, inside the sail barge, Princess Leia fights to escape. Now clad in her slave bikini, Leia uses her chain as her weapon. A nice detail is that the energy wave, which can still be emitted by charging the weapon, now takes the form of a more curved, elegant shape, as opposed to the more angular energy wave produced by the Dausch version of Leia. The stage isn't that long, and we fight familiar enemy faces from previous stages while navigating some platforming sections. There is actually a pretty easy secret spot to locate, with power-ups and extra lives which can be farmed if need be, since it is right next to a checkpoint. Once we reach the top floor, Salacious Crumb returns to taunt us, and we quickly come face to face with Jabba the Hutt himself. Just like the movie, it's time for Leia to kill Jabba. Charge up the chain, unleash the energy wave, and Jabba is history. A quick end to an icon of healthy living. The game completely bypasses any reference to the Rebel briefing with Mon Mothma and Admiral Akbar, and we swiftly move to Endor. But rest assured, many Bothans did die to bring us the information. We have the option of playing as either Luke or Leia. Either choice makes no difference, but it is a nice detail that they decided to let us pick either hero. The first Endor stage sees us blasting through the forest, being pursued by scout troopers on their speeder bikes. They can be defeated by either bashing into them or letting them overtake you and blasting at them. Once a certain amount are destroyed, we move on to the next Endor stage. The Mode 7 graphic effects don't quite do the Redwood Forests, where the movie was filmed, any justice, and the depth perception can be a bit tough when collecting hearts to replenish health, causing you to miss them completely. It amazes me how in the movie they managed to make the atmosphere of the Redwood Forest so alien with the various wildlife sound effects that they used. Much like how they made the desert in A New Hope feel so alien despite just being filmed in Tunisia. And just like that, Leia recruits the Ewoks to help us fight the Empire. And now begins 2 stages where we get to play as Wicket the Ewok. These 2 Ewok stages are based at night time. Fires blaze in the background and wildlife runs berserk here in Ewok Village. The aforementioned unknown blue and yellow creatures, green bats, green blobs from the Rancor pit, to name a few repeated enemies. However, we also get a new grey dinosaur enemy here, of which there's no additional information about. We do here also have Endorian mosquitoes and Endorian fly traps. The The stage takes on a nice atmosphere based on Ewok village at night. Fires flicker inside the Ewok huts. It must be those cosy lights that's attracting all of the wildlife pests. Clearly, these night stages on Endor are based upon when the Ewoks had our heroes captured and intended to cook them as a banquet for Leia. I feel like people let that slide a lot. That the Ewoks were gonna burn people alive? The Ewoks gameplay differs a little since you can grab and swing onto nodules protruding from the tree trunks. Additionally, Wicket uses a bow, complete with arrows as his weapon of choice. It is possible to shoot arrows into tree trunks and then jump on the arrows that protrude from the trunk to progress your way further up the stage. Scout troopers appear also in this stage as enemies. Now remember how in Jabba's dungeon we fought a giant frog dog? Even though EV9D9, the droid, may have been a better choice. Well, for some reason they decided that EV9D9 would make for a better boss on the forest moon of Endor. I'm not sure why, but here she is, and honestly, is not a very hard battle at all. Ewok Village Part 2 sees us as Wicket traversing more forest. This one stumped me as a kid, no pun intended. Nothing but water and a large tree. Well, turns out you need to awkwardly move on arrows that you shoot into the tree and use them as a ladder of sorts. This kind of mechanic isn't explained, so it would mean that you'd need to discover it. This stage has a couple of cool little water slides and an instant death water pit at the bottom that you need to look out for. There are some big menacing Endorian snakes here too. Anyway, that's what I'm calling them. They have not appeared in any other Star Wars media. Some enemies from Tatooine show up here as well, such as the big purple mantises. The boss of this stage, simply entitled Giant Forest Beast, isn't too tricky to beat at all. Simply jump over him whenever he charges towards you and pelt him with arrows. And that concludes our 2 stages playing as Wicket the Ewok. So, despite Vader not revealing that he is Luke's father in the previous game, Luke does indeed know, and he informs Leia that he is also her brother. We get another Endor at night stage here, and I do think the background of this stage, the forest, the Death Star and the shield generator, is really impressive pixel art. This stage is to emulate Luke's surrender to the Empire, where he is taken to Vader via an AT-AT. So this stage has AT-ATs as actual platforming obstacles. We get Endorian lizards and some unidentified floating droid, or maybe it's a biological entity on Endor. I have no idea, there's no additional information about this. It shoots some kind of like spore, I really have no idea what it is, but yeah, this thing's here too, yes it is. The ultimate goal is to reach the top tier of platforms and progress to the right, as reaching the very end of the screen on the bottom floor will not end the stage. Navigating moving platforms and electrifying docking bay corridors provide additional challenge. There are a few droid enemies on the stage, such as the flying lightning droid, the rolling droid and the bombardment droid. No extra information is known about these droids due to only ever featuring in this game. So I thought I'd seen it all at this point, and then I came across this strange metallic wheeling droid, and then its legs retracted and it flew away like a bug. So that kind of caught me by guard, because I've played this game multiple times and I do not ever remember seeing that. I'm going to call that the Beetle bug droid. There's no information about that online, so that's the Beetle bug board. The Beetle bug droid. That's what it is. Quick note, there are some Imperial shuttles in the background. The boss of this stage is an Imperial ship that dispatches 0G assault troopers. We fought these troopers briefly in the previous game in Echo Base. In order to finish this battle, Luke must destroy the ship itself to prevent more troops from spawning. Lando Calrissian and 9 Num come out of hyperspace ready to attack the new Death Star. We have to give Han, Chewie and Leia more time to destroy that shield generator. So, meanwhile, in space, above the forest moon of Endor, we resume control of the Millennium Falcon, under the command of Lando and 9 Num. In this brief stage, we rotate the turret to blast apart a bunch of TIE interceptors. It isn't quite as epic as the trap battle in the movie, but here it is anyway. And once a certain amount are destroyed, we move on to the next stage. The ironic thing about this game is that in the movie it is based upon, which is obviously Return of the Jedi, there is a big battle during the daytime on the moon of Endor. But in the game, we get no daytime Endor stages in the forest. It could have been fun to allow us as Han, Leia, Wicket or Chewie to take on troopers in the forest with an ATST as a boss, or even play as Chewie in the ATST as we scout on the troopers. After all, we did get to fly the snowspeeder in the last game. So why there is no daytime Endor battle stage? Well, that's a mystery to me. Anyway, the next stage is inside the bunker of the shield generator. In this stage, we get the option of playing as either Leia, Han or Chewie, and I think it's fair to say that LucasArts did a great job of replicating the backdrop of the shield generator base into the game. Besides a bunch of angry FX7 medical droids which attempt to zap you, be prepared for a lot of bottomless pits and tricky platforming. There are also elevators to use which transport you to different catwalks, some patrolled by what appear to be Imperial gunners. At some point near the end of the stage, a large green energy beam will be blasted through the centre of the screen. That is the shield generator core, which is actually the boss of the level. Our hero must platform and jump around while shooting at the generator. It isn't that tough, really. The deflector shield explodes, leaving the Death Star unprotected. In all honesty, I find this next stage, the Death Star 2 hangar bay, to be the least interesting, and it could have been cut for a daytime forest stage, as I mentioned not long ago. FX7 droids and Imperial gunners take up most of the enemy confrontations on this stage. Some Imperial officers show up also. The stage is quite short and ends with a fight versus 2 0G troopers, which do not even get credited as a boss fight, since there's no boss music or even health bars for them. The stage kinda feels unfinished and pointless, if I'm being honest. And from one short stage we'll jump to another short stage, where we will be flying the Millennium Falcon, but this time it's much more like the X-Wing in the previous games, where we play it in a third person perspective and fly around above the Death Star 2. The Falcon must blast apart around 20 TIE interceptors with its big chunky red projectile. And once that is done, this stage will also be complete. But yes, there's really just not a lot to talk about in regards to these past 2 stages. And so, we reach the final stretch of the whole Super Star Wars SNES trilogy. The Emperor shows his face as we enter the next stage. Set inside the second Death Star, it is hard to compare the interior with the movie since it is vastly different. Luke only really features in the throne room and doesn't walk the hallways on the screen. Being the Death Star 2, we obviously come across stormtroopers, but we also come across this blue royal guard. He is unique, almost like he is supposed to be a boss, but again, There's no boss music or health bar for him. We also come across some regular Red Royal Guards, just before we have the final duel with Darth Vader. And unlike the previous duels with Vader, where he would flee at the end, this time he collapses. Luke has finally beaten Lord Vader. The Emperor scoffs, and upon learning that Luke will not turn to the dark side, decides that it is time to put an end to Luke Skywalker. If Luke won't be turned, then he will be destroyed. And so, it all comes down to this. The final on-foot stage of the old Super Star Wars trilogy begins, an all-out battle with the Emperor. The Emperor levitates around his throne room, firing out bolts of electricity which destroy the ground that you stand on, creating instant death pits should you fall down them. The battle ends with the Emperor falling downwards towards the bottomless pit himself, and then we are treated to a SNES cutscene rendition of the Emperor dropping down the shaft to his death. Luke unveils Vader's true face so that he can look at him with his own eyes, and insists that he informs his sister Leia that he was indeed right about him and that there was good in him all along. However, the game is not over yet. Lando still needs to blow up the Death Star, which, by the way, I feel like Lando doesn't get enough credit for. You are not having a seizure. The finale of the game and Super Star Wars trilogy overall takes the form of a first-person perspective flight through the Death Star's infrastructure as the Millennium Falcon. The level consists of nothing but rotating the camera essentially and not bashing into the sides. TIE fighters will also attempt to shoot at you. After reaching the middle of the Death Star, it is time to destroy the core. As the innards of the Death Star collapse, we must now escape. This final part plays out the same way. Only this time, if you don't hurry up, flames from the exploding Death Star will begin to catch up to you and engulf you. This part caused me a lot of trouble as a kid. I don't know if maybe it may have been better to do a stage like this but in third person perspective. The stage as it is kind of feels like a tech demo, though I guess it does the job of putting the player in the thick of the chaos as the Death Star collapses and provides good tension. And upon escaping the Death Star as it explodes, we have now completed all 3 Super Star Wars games. With a heavy heart from Luke's perspective at the death of his father that he saved, we pan to the fireworks and celebrations of Ewok Village. Due to this game being released before the special editions, the classic Ewok Yub Nub celebration theme music plays. The diegetic sound of the Ewoks celebration does have its place, since we are all in the village celebrating, and it's very nostalgic as well. Though the special edition brought with it a completely new celebration theme which encompasses a galaxy-wide celebration and creates a much more grand sense of achievement, of freedom, and honestly has a much more emotional build-up before the final cut to the end credits. I personally enjoy both of the celebration themes, but what about you? And so concludes this odyssey, this quest, this tour, this adventure through all 3 Super Star Wars games on the Super Nintendo. I hope you enjoyed watching this. It took me a long time to put this all together, and I hope you found some nostalgic and comforting feelings whilst watching this on our quest to explore the galaxy within the Star Wars games. I've nothing left to say now, apart from may the force be with you, and thank you for watching.